Live stream. Got it. Okay, I got it.
Shalom, shalom. My name is Gidon Ariel of Root Source, and I am happy to be the host today with my friend Rabbi Yeshayahu Hollander, who has been in Israel for many years. And we met actually earlier this week and told me a little bit of his life story, primarily because he reached out to me because he found out about Root Source and the work that we're doing between Christians and Jews. But before I was willing to tell him anything about Root Source, I wanted to hear a little bit about his story. And I found it very, very fascinating. So we will begin. Rabbi Hollander, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yep. I'm nearly 85 years old, and I've been in Israel since 1948. When I was 11, we came on Aliyah. The war was still going on here. And, well, as a kid, it was a lot of fun being in a war. It wasn't, we were in Tel Aviv, and it was, I was born in America in 1937. And as a child, I still remember seeing films of newsreels of the Second World War, and they made quite an impression on me, a lasting impression on me, even though at the age of 7, probably, or 8, I saw the newsreels when they took me to the movies. And actually, the Shoah, called the Shoah, the Holocaust, which is really a misnomer if there ever was one. It was not a natural catastrophe, which is what the Shoah or Holocaust is. It was a genocide, a new word which was invented around that time. It was a mass murder of Jews with an attempt to exterminate them. And this made, of course, a big impression on all Jews at that time, and even on a kid, 7 years old, he knew what was going on. And my parents were both active Zionists. My mother actually wrote a book which she called why was I born in America, and why did I survive the murder of the attempt to exterminate the Jews? And until about a decade, maybe a little more, we would inspect everything that we bought to make sure it wasn't made in Germany.
Rabbi Hollander, you said that your mother wrote a book?
Yes, called Y.I. It was sold on Vanguard, I think. I don't remember. I have some copies still, if I give to my grandchildren.
The name of the book is Y.I.?
Y.I. Y.I. question mark. With the question mark. Y.I.
Like what?
On the net. Maybe I should put it on the net. I have most of the things on my computer anyway. I can put it up. And my father also wrote an autobiography with the name My Life and What I Did with It. My life, our life is a resource, and you use the resource well or not. My father used the resource very well.
What was the name? What was his name? Who was the author?
I didn't get that.
What is your father's name?
My father's name was Herman Hollander. He was as a young man, when he came to the States, at the age of 19 to broaden the family business. And my grandfather was a delegate to the early Zionist Congresses, and left when the Zionist Congress decided to support schools which taught agnosticism. And he went on to be the man who arranged the diplomacy to set up the Haredi Agudat Yisrael, International Agudat Yisrael. It had existed in various countries, but the international organization, my grandfather was instrumental in setting up. My father remained in the Mizrahi, in the Orthodox Zionist organization, and that's where we were brought up. Certainly, actually, it's a simple distinction. There are people who see themselves as Jewish Americans. We didn't see ourselves that way. We saw us as American Jews. We were very happy to be American. If we hadn't been American, we probably wouldn't be here. And but of course, we would have been European, and then the chances of survival were very small. And but and I still think that America is a wonderful country, which has gone. There's a lot of correction to do there, but it was probably the best country for Jews in the last 2 millennia. But we are Jews by nature and American. We were American. I'm still an American citizen, but American by chance, or why? By God's direction. And so when the UN voted on establishing a Jewish state in Palestine in November 29th, 1947, which was a Friday, we listened. We were practically attached to the radio. And when it was finished and it was positive, we were thrilled, but it was just a short time before the Sabbath began, and we had no time to really relate to that. We had a lot of things to do, and but Shabbat morning, I came out of the children's room, and my father coming out of the parents' room before going to synagogue, and he asked me, "Did you understand what we heard yesterday?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "What did you understand?" And I said that we're going to Palestine, and he said, "That's right." And he came. He left his business with partners, and he came to Palestine right away. And he was in the ceremony of declaring the state on May 15th, 1948. And my mother came to what?
Tell me, Hollander, do you perhaps know what was the date or what month your father arrived in Palestine, in Israel?
My father came to left in 1947. He came to Palestine the first time, came back for Passover, and then flew back to Palestine. And we children, we were sent to camp for the summer, and my mother came to Palestine to find a home. My father was too busy helping the fledgling state, and found a home. And then after the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the fall festivities, we came to. By then, it was already Israel.
Wow, that's amazing.
That was my. That was when I was at the age of 11, and then I learned here, studied. I went to elementary school, high school, university. I went to Tzahal at later because they wouldn't draft me because I was American.
Why wouldn't they?
I had to threaten them with going to the Israeli Supreme Court so that they would draft me. Later, I had to threaten the American embassy here that I would go to the U.S. Supreme Court because it said since I had served in the Israeli army, I lost my American citizenship. And I said it's not true. and that's again there was a McCarran Act which said that, and I said the McCarran Act is not constitutional. The Supreme Court had already said it was unconstitutional, and that part of it, and they will say about the rest if I take it to the high court. So an hour later, I got the response from Washington that I'm an American citizen. They gave me the passport.
How old were you?
That is due to the fifth grade education in the religious school that I learned. We learned religious studies until about 1231 or something like that. And we learned general studies from 2 to 4. And then by the fifth grade, we had learned, in the fifth grade, we learned the American Constitution. And so I knew my rights. And I knew where the law is wrong. We learned that as children. Jewish American Orthodox people, we learned the American Constitution as children.
Where were you? You were in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, sure.
What school did you attend that fifth grade boys knew the Constitution off by heart?
Right. At that ancient period, children were expected to learn, to know, and so we learned and we knew.
Oh wow! I can barely imagine that, even me.
So I learned in the. My father was fairly wealthy. I didn't have to worry about what I would do for a job. I learned theoretical physics at the Hebrew University. I have a master's degree. I didn't do a doctorate because I didn't think that the subject was, that the knowledge there would tell me more about this wonderful machine that God made. And that was the reason that I took the time to learn physics. And then I went into industry.
Did you study in yeshiva when you were younger?
Certainly I was in yeshiva.
Which yeshiva?
Well, okay, I'll admit it. I went to a yeshiva which doesn't accept students who are learning at the university. The head of the yeshiva, actually, before I was bar mitzvah, at the age of 13, my father took me to the head of this most important yeshiva Panovich in Bnei Brak. And he said, so the rabbi, the head of the yeshiva said, well, you're going to be bar mitzvah soon. I'll tell you, give you what your father said on his bar mitzvah. And he proceeded to tell me what my father had said at his bar mitzvah. Was about 40 years before.
But your father wasn't
wait a minute, it was more than my father was 33 when I was born, so he was 40. So 33 years before, the rabbi had heard my father give his talk at the bar mitzvah, so he gave me the talk that my father said. My father remembered, that's actually what I did say, yes. The rabbi remembered. My father hadn't thought about it for those years, but when I was doing my master's, I was working at the Weizmann Institute and had 3 minutes weekly of computer time.
What year was that?
There was one computer in Israel at that time, which I had access to for 3 minutes a week. And what I do the rest of the week, yeah, that was in 1960 about. So I had plenty of time on my hands, so I could go to yeshiva. I went to the head of the yeshiva and I said, Rabbi, can I come and learn here? And he said, well, you don't become friendly with people. People should not know that you are attended and are at the university. So I attended the university and kept to myself. I had a few friends and didn't talk very much with them because it surely would have come out. So I spent some time at the yeshiva Panovich, and later I learned at the Kollel Volozhin, which is one of the most Haredi Litvische Haredi yeshivas in Kollel. I wasn't a Kollelnik. I was not married, but I had the experience of learning in these Torah centers.
But your father, you say, was an activist in the Mizrahi movement, right?
Yeah. Right.
And you yourself were quite the Zionist. There were no Zionist yeshivas that you could go to?
Well, the Panovich Yeshiva, which is known as a Haredi Yeshiva, they flew the flag on Yom Ha'atzmaut. The Kol Volozhin, I don't know, but Kol Volozhin, it was run by a descendant of the Netziv, of Natali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who was also use the word Zionist. The word Zionist is used in a political sense.
Yes.
But that is taking things the wrong way. I don't think there are no, as far as I know, there are no really observant Jews who are not Zionists. In other words, who don't wish to live in the Holy Land. There are some Jews who don't wish to live in the Holy Land. There are a lot of Jews who would like to come, but they don't have time. They have to do their business. They have to have. So they're socially not actively, and they're not connected with the Zionist organization, but they know very well that the place of the Jewish people is in the Holy Land. Even people who are not observant also know that. There are only some, I don't know how many, who really think that the Jews should be dispersed all over the world. Well, there are reasons to think that. It's not a ridiculous idea, but the natural way to say is, well, I want to go home, and home is only in the Holy Land.
And you of course were there. So what I'm trying to understand, you see, today is a little bit different than 50, 60 years ago. So today, I wouldn't think for a second to go to Panovich, certainly not to a more Haredi yeshiva. Today there are dozens and dozens and maybe hundreds of yeshivot that the students and even the teachers are very, very pro-Zionist. But in those days, I'm wondering. Rabbi Hollander, I'm wondering, do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
I'm asking, were there any, like Merkaz Harav perhaps, or Kfar Oeh,
actually, I was no, I never went. When I'm in Yerushalayim over Shabbat, if I'm around there, I go pray in Yeshivat Merkaz Harav. But no, I didn't connect with them. I had friends there at the Merkaz Harav. I had friends, but one of them was at the time. Now he's a rabbi in the rabbi of Kiryat Shmona, and I had other friends there. I had friends in Hebron Yeshiva, also. I even had friends at the university.
That's
right, and that means friends at the university. I don't think I had one religious friend at the Hebrew University. Everybody was secular and at best agnostic, and to a large, most of them considered themselves atheistic.
Anti-religious.
That was a period. Did I tell you that when I was in Turkey in 2009, I came across an article. I was waiting for a meeting, and I went to the library and I found a journal in English. So I said I looked in to see, and it had an article by a woman called Catherine, I think, Armstrong, and she said the article was, I think the name God Again or something, and she said the 21st century will be the third century in which religion returns. That religion was very much weakened in the 20th century, both in certainly in Europe. in America also. And in the first part of the 20th century until the origin has also been weakened in Europe and in the United States. Probably I don't know about Canada or Mexico, but anyway, we call it America, right? And but according to her understanding, it's coming back in the 21st century. And did I tell you I'm reading this book, The Master and His Emissary, and he also says that the misunderstanding of the world merely on the basis of analysis is a great mistake. And for a much fuller understanding, we have to use not the analysis, but we have to use the spirit.
This is a book that is
the person who wrote it is not a Jew. He's an Irish Christian, I think Irish. Ivan Gilchrist, hardly a Jewish name.
So, but getting back to, you're saying that in the 60s, in the late 50s and the early 60s, there was no such thing as in Israel as a yeshiva university. Either you were in yeshiva in Panovich or in Hebron, or you were in university, and you were the only person in both.
I was both, and as you know, my name is is Yeshayahu. That's Isaiah, and people who know the Christian audience probably knows that there are people who say there were two Isaiahs or more. And so at my wedding, the rabbi said, well, here we have the two Isaiahs in one person. The fellow learning physics and the fellow goes to yeshiva, they're one person. I also think I was never convinced that Isaiah is two people. And when he writes about different things, he uses different styles, just like Shakespeare does. I said, Shakespeare, how many Shakespeares? Well, they say Shakespeare wasn't Shakespeare, it was somebody else who called himself Shakespeare.
I'm not going into biblical criticism just now, but so you were studying not necessarily your spare time, but part-time in yeshiva, and most of the time in university until you concluded your.
Actually, most of my time was spare time. If I could work for 3 minutes a week, most of my time was spare time.
That's wild. I hear you. That's crazy.
At that period, there were a couple of years like that I spent at the yeshiva at Panovich.
And then you finally concluded your master's degree and went to work, you said, for Tiny Ram. Is that the first job you got?
No. The first thing I went into was an odd opportunity, and I was not really prepared for it. It was in the chemical industry. And I used my intelligence, not what I had done. Well, the first thing they said, they had a problem with vibration of a machine, which was ruining the workpiece. And there was a wonderful book in classical mechanics. It was called, written by a fellow named Goldstein, and this was a standard book all over the U.S. I learned in Israel, but it was the best book in classical mechanics. And when I came to see this machine, I said, okay, if I want to do physics on this, it will take me about 2 years. So I said, well, let's see how we can stop it otherwise. Can we stop the vibrations? And yes, well, if we make a base for the machine, which will weigh about 1.5 tons, that should solve the problem. Without analyzing what causes it, we may be able to stop it. So we did. They did. And then he said, okay, you gave us good advice, come and work for us. So I came and worked with them. They were giving it was a good salary, a decent salary. At that time, it was a good salary. And since I didn't I also gave them an idea how to improve the chemical, because that I knew. Chemistry I had learned. As learning physics, you learn chemistry also. So I gave them advice on that, and they called in the experts, and they took my idea, and they managed to make the chemical processing another day faster by 1 day, which was very important for the plant because of Shabbat they couldn't work on Shabbat. So that interfered with the work, and I figured out a way to make the process shorter so that on when they work piece, they do the work, start the work on Thursday, they can finish it before Shabbat. And so on Shabbat, people didn't have to work. Things were done. There was automatic machines working, but people didn't have to work in the plant. Everything was done automatically on the Shabbat. So that.
What company?
What?
What company was that you worked at?
Pardon?
What was the name of the company that you worked at?
The company. Well, actually, the company. The name of the company was Derma. It was in a tanning company. Tanning, we tanned hides, and the company was successful until the 6-Day War. Before the 6-Day War, they signed a contract to supply the Polish army with leather. The whole a very big contract, and as you since the raw material, the hides, are a fluctuating commodity, the company bought a large, in futures and so on, contracts to buy the hides over the period to supply the army. Because you have to have a fixed price with the company, you have to have a fixed price for your raw material, otherwise you're like to lose. Well, so they bought a huge amount, a huge quantity of raw material, and after the 6-Day War, the Poles, who were under the Russians, canceled the contract, and they were left with no working capital, and the company went broke.
Wow!
So I went into actually the first thing I did after that was I went to work in the American Israeli paper mills, which was a very big company at that time in Israel, one of the biggest, and until a few years before that had been losing money. It was formed by a Jew from the United States who was in the forest industry and timber, and he would arrange the supply of raw material for making paper, because paper is made from wood.
Right.
But it was not successful until they took a fellow who was a vice minister in Romania.
Okay.
And he took charge of running, not of the operation of the, but of the organization of the company. And when I came there, after a period, they taught me the procedures, and I had to sign that I learned the procedures, and my superior had to sign that he knew that I knew the procedures. I was told that from every machine in that plant has to give a report to this controller of the company by 10 o'clock every morning, and the report has to have how much energy was used and how much raw material was used, and were there any problems and what the problems were, and so on and so forth. And every manager had to sit at his desk at 10 o'clock in the morning, because the controller would call him up and tell him what went wrong and give me more information. Anyway, that tight control set the company up financially. And every month they would have a monthly report, which was a book about this thick, this big and this thick. And the directors would get this book, but you had to supply the information by the 3rd day of the next month. because by the 10th day it had to go to the directors. So it was very tight control, and it was very successful. It became very successful. And then that was when I finished my apprenticeship at that company. They asked me, do I want to take on a new job? What's the new job? Well, they have a company dealing in R&D, research and development, and there's a problem of control. How you can't do that to research and development. How do you know what's going to happen? You can't do any standard thing. And that was on Thursday afternoon. I chose that job. He offered me a few, but that was the most interesting. And I went right away to the center, Machon Pirion Avodah V'Yitzur, an organization, a government organization, teaching people how to control industry. And I went right away to the library there to read what are the procedures. And I saw that there's absolutely nothing of any value besides financial control, and that's ridiculous. That doesn't really help you.
Right.
So I invented a system based on PERT, people. Which was basically a system of handling a building project in which you know exactly what you're going to do before you begin. And I adapted that to something when you don't know exactly what you're going to do and you have to play it by ear. And I got the job. And a couple of years later, they wanted me to, they had this controller, and they had the general manager of this company. And they began to have disagreements about what they should do, and the controller wanted me to actually cause the general manager to leave and to take his place. And I said, thank you very much. No, I don't want to get involved in fights, and I quit the company. And I began to look for. So I found myself in Tadiran a couple of years later, which was that time the biggest electronics company in Israel, and not a very important position there, and the controller of the import, which was a large amount of money and a lot of shipments and so on. And I invented a system there, and IBM came and said, you can't do that. How can you do that? I said, you can't do it otherwise. And they agreed and set up the company, set up this system, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I kept on. I actually left industry in about 1999, and I taught myself at a high school yeshiva, and then at a Hester yeshiva. When you're here, when you're there, and I said, I guess I'm not very suited for that. So I became a patent attorney.
Oh.
I'm patent attorney number 223 in Israel. That's in the year 2004. So if you had a 2004, say 1944 to 2060 years, nearly 60 years, say 55 years. And in 55 years, they had only about 200 patent attorneys, and I managed to pass the test. The way I passed the tests are very. You have two tests. You have a written test and you have an oral test. Now, the written test, I passed. You only get pass or don't pass. There's no other mark. I passed. And the way I passed the oral exam was really with the help of God. Because at that time, I was learning the Talmud. I was spending about 8 hours a day learning Talmud. And to pass the test, in principle, you really have to know the law. A patent attorney is different than a regular attorney. In the United States, any attorney is a patent attorney. But you can be a patent attorney in Israel without being a lawyer. Not in the States, you have to be a lawyer. But in Israel, you don't have to be a lawyer. But you have to pass a test. And what is the difference between a patent attorney in Israel and a lawyer? A lawyer has to know Israeli law. In principle, every possible subject. A patent attorney doesn't have to know about every possible subject, but he has to know about every possible country. If you want to be a patent attorney, you have to help your client get his patent in China too.
Right.
And in Sri Lanka. So you have to have be able to understand the patent laws, and not only the laws, but you have to understand what the precedents are. When you take generally patent cases don't end at the first judge. You then usually it goes up to a higher court, a circuit court. Circuit court is very usual. Rarely does it go to a Supreme Court. Usually it's up level of and so there's litigation. And so you have to know the stuff very well. And I said to God, I don't want to spend all the time necessary. I'm busy learning the book you gave to the Jews. That's what I want to do. I don't want to learn all of that. And if I don't pass a test without learning, I'll have to learn it. So it's up to you, God, whether I pass a test or not. So he gave me an inspiration. And the inspiration was, think about your Jacob, your forefather Jacob. He had a situation which was like a test. He had to meet his brother Esau. And he prepared by prayer and by strategy and by giving a presence.
Yes.
Strategy, he separated the camp, and so that if Esau would hit one side, the other would survive, and so on. Well, how can I give presents to people who are going to test me? Isn't that called a bribe? I can't do that. What present can I possibly give them? But I don't know how many people of you have tested people for their career. And think about that situation. A fellow comes to you, he's over 30, he's a college graduate in natural sciences, in chemistry, in physics, at worst in math.
Yeah.
And he spent 2 years before he can take the test. He spends 2 years working on the job, and most of the people are married, already have children, and they have to support their family, and they make this. If they don't make this test, that's years wasted. And it's not. I don't envy people who sit in these tests and have to decide whether a person passes the test or not.
Right.
But most of the people are not passed.
Right.
In the number of people taking the tests every year is about 40, and only about 10% pass.
No!
That was the situation by 2004. I don't know what it is today. So the thing that I can give them is to make it easy for them, because they're under strain. So
right.
How I can make the test easy for them.
Okay.
For me, I don't have to worry about myself. Think about them. And then I think about a strategy. What can I do so that they should ask me questions which I can answer? So since I had been working on the Talmud, and I had been making an edition of the Talmud, I said I'll prepare about copyright laws, and I'll tell them, well, what happens is when you have an oral test like that, the first thing they know everybody comes in to take the test.
Yes.
Very, very tense. So they try to start with easy questions. They first ask you, what is your name? They know your name. They have it on, but they ask you, what's your name? How old are you? What did you learn? Are you married? Children? Where do you live? They ask also questions like that to try to lower the tension. And then they began asking simpler questions, which they expect you to answer. And as they proceed, they go on to more and more difficult questions. Okay. Sometimes they do that once or twice or 3 times. Anyway. So in the initial questions, I told them that I was working on, I was making a new edition of the Talmud. That's 27 volumes.
Right.
It took me about 15 years, a little less. No, 12 years.
Did you complete?
What? Yes, it's published. It's published. It was an edition. Was never printed. It was edition made for screens. Learning Talmud, you have a text and you have commentaries, and they're printed on the same page. And the way you usually learn it is holding one finger in one place and another finger in the other place. On the screen, it's not very convenient.
Right.
So I took the standard commentary, Rashi, and I embedded it in the text of the Talmud. And that meant editing, not the text of the Talmud, but what piece of the commentary fits where into the text. And sometimes it's a long commentary and has to be broken up. It was a lot of work. I tell you, I spent about 8 hours a day on that for 10 years. So in any case, it's on the internet, and it's on various hard disks that are sold to people who are interested.
What is it called?
It's called Gemara Nocha. Nocha, the words Nun, Vav, Chet, Hey are the initials of my parents. Naphtali is my father's name in Hebrew, not Herman in English, but actually from Germany. And Chana is my mother, Grace in English. Nocha is Naphtali v'Chana Hollander. So that's why I called it Gemara Nocha. And Nocha means easy to use.
Right.
Comfortable. So I have a comfortable Talmud. Talmud is comfortable to use on a screen. And I had many people from all over the world, Jews from all over the world who were interested, said now they have a laptop, now they can they can learn on the plane. They don't have to take a big volume. The volumes of the Talmud are pretty heavy. And if you want to learn, you seriously learn, you usually use more than one volume. So people were very happy with that. I told that, they said, what do you do? What have you done? Have you got a hobby? I said, yes, my hobby is learning Talmud. And I've made this, I'm working on this edition. So they asked me, of course, about whether I know I have copyright or not. And I talked about copyright, and that was all right. And they asked me more difficult questions about other things. When they asked me the difficult question, which I really had no idea, they asked me a difficult question, which I knew, and then they asked me a really difficult question. I said, I don't know. So they started again with an easier question, and they went up to the harder question. And again, I said, I don't know. And the third time, after I said the third time, I don't know, it's a difficult question. They asked me, you don't know and you expect to be a patent attorney? And I said, yes. How are you going to solve these problems? I said, it's very easy. I come to if I have a case which has a difficult question, I'm going to tell the client, this is a difficult question and you really need an expert in the particular law applying to this. Yes. And that's going to cost you $10,000. And I give half to the lawyer and retain half myself. So just like you're laughing, they laughed and they passed me. So I really don't know the law, and I was not very good at being a patent attorney. But I got I got the license, and I kept the job for a while until I was tired of it.
Hollander, the time is coming to a close. I'd like to try to summarize a tiny bit of what we've done today, and we'll continue another day. With your permission, we heard about how you moved to Israel the same year, just a few months after the state of Israel was established in 1948, how your father came here before that, and afterwards, how you were studying in yeshiva and in university at the same time, which was something
that was in the years between 56 and 63. That
was something out of the ordinary in those times.
Well, while I was at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, I had a friend who had the Hebron Yeshiva, and I would come to the Mea Shorim on my bike.
Yes.
And I had a bike, and I would go there, and then we would learn in a synagogue for a couple of hours a day, and that went on for a few years. Later, he became a rabbi and wrote a book, and I saw in his book that some of the things that we had learned together.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
So we really have barely just scratched the surface here. I hope that you've been enjoying your time, because I certainly have. And we will set up for another time to speak as well, with your permission.
Fine. It will be a pleasure.
We'll be in touch by email. Are we already on Facebook, on WhatsApp together?
Sure.
Okay, we'll be in touch there too.
Okay.
So, thank you very much. Shalom, shalom.